Hi there. Today we're going to make a handprint salt dough pumpkin. And I made a sample here. It'll look a little bit like this when you're finished. So in order to make the pumpkin, you will need flour, salt, and warm water. So you'll need a cup of flour, 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of salt, and a half a cup of warm water. You'll need a rolling pin, a printout of a pumpkin, so it gives you something to cut your dough with, tablecloth or wax paper to cover your surface, spoons or knives to stir your dough with, and any paints that you will want to paint your pumpkin. So let's get started. First, you're going to combine your ingredients. So again, it's 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of salt, and you're going to need several of these small 26-ounce containers of salt if you're going to make several handprint pumpkins, because you can get about 2 cups per and a little bit more per container. And then a half a cup of warm water. You pour that in. And I'm going to mix it with some knives or a spoon or your hands. And you mix the dough in. I found with the half a cup of water, as you're mixing, you still kind of need to add a little bit of more water, just a little bit at a time, because it's a little dry. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more till you get that right consistency of dough. It dries up really quickly. I would say it might end up being about a cup of warm water, but just add it slowly and mix it in. You don't want to add too much water. Okay, it's getting to be like dough, so I'm going to take my knives out and actually use my hands to kind of knead it together. I'm stirring and mixing at the same time with my hands. And I still need just a little bit of water. Get all those dry ingredients mixed together. And I'm just mixing and kneading it, rolling it in the bowl to mix it together. So you want to knead it until it's well combined and smooth. And it makes a great ball. So you can take that ball out of the bowl, set that aside. Now you've got yourself a nice ball. So we're going to roll this out. Your rolling pin out. Tablecloth makes it a little tricky. Now, the thicker your dough is, the longer it will take to dry. So, if you want, you could probably get, depending on the size of your handprint that you need, and your pumpkin, you could get probably 2 pumpkins per mixture if you roll it out relatively thin. You don't want it too thin. So it falls apart. Now when I made my sample, it's pretty thick, so it took a couple extra days to dry completely through before you wanted to paint it, because it is thicker. Get that even, relatively rolled out evenly. Okay, and then you want to take your pumpkin pattern, place it right on your dough, whatever fits, and if you can fit 2 on there, that's great. You probably could fit about 2 on there. And place that on the dough. You can use, I used a toothpick to trace your pumpkin pattern. I just made little dots around to trace the outline of the pumpkin pattern. So I'm just poking little holes along the pattern of the pumpkin, right along the edge. And you go all the way around the edge, and this is when you'll need a knife or a plastic knife. Go right up the stem. Okay, then you take your pattern off, so you'll see the outline of the pumpkin with your dots from your toothpick. And I have a plastic knife, so now I'm going to cut this out. And if you've done it on wax paper, that's great, so you can transfer it off your counter to let it air dry. Or if you rolled it out on a cookie sheet, you want to be careful so you can transfer it to a surface where you can let it just sit there and dry in the air. And like I said, depending on how thick it is, you might have to wait more than 1 day. It might be a couple days. So now, just like you take the excess dough, and with the extra dough, you could put it back in a ball and roll it back out and make another one. If you weren't able to fit your pumpkin design side by side. So now we have the pumpkin. What I did was like just kind of press the edges to kind of smooth the edges a little bit where the knife cuts were. And then you want to put your handprint right in the middle. Now my hand's a little bit bigger than my pumpkin, but I did make a small print. So press your hand right in the middle, make sure you can see it pretty well. Just be careful not to go through your entire pumpkin dough. And once you have your handprint in your dough, then that's when you'll transfer it to a surface where you can let it sit out. Just let it sit out in the air for a couple days till you see that the dough is completely dried through. And then once it's dry through, you can paint your pumpkin however you would like to paint it. I painted the handprint a little bit lighter so that you could see it with the orange around the pumpkin and a brown stem. And I just added a little chenille stem to add a little more to the pumpkin. You could put a little tag on it, to grandma from, you could do that too. So just make sure your dough gets a good chance to dry completely through before you paint it, and then your paint's gonna need probably about a day to dry as well. But that is your handprint salt dough pumpkin. So I'd love to see pictures. If anybody wants to send pictures after they finish theirs, post them on our Facebook page. But enjoy, have fun.